what's happening with women in menopause?
How is none of this information out there? Why aren't people talking about it? How do we get information? What do we do? Why do we think hormones are doing? What do we do? There's a lot we don't know, but I definitely know what my end goal is. My end goal is to close some of those gaps when it comes to research dollars, to access to information, to making sure that women know what's going on, and to making sure the generation coming up behind us knows what's going on. Lifestyle changes are going to be important. Supplementation might be important. Exercise, under lifestyle, sleep, stress, all those different things, how we work out.
Really, the answer is in personalization.
100%.
Please join me in welcoming Tamsen Fadal, an Emmy award-winning journalist, author, documentary filmmaker, and social media's midlife mentor. After more than 3 decades as a news anchor, Tamsen made the bold decision to pivot her career towards women's advocacy. From the bedroom to the boardroom, she serves as a best friend and a guide, a one-stop resource for everything women need to thrive during midlife and beyond. Her latest book, How to Menopause, Take Charge of Your Health, Reclaim Your Life, and Feel Even Better Than Before, will be available in March of 2025. She's also the creator and the producer of the groundbreaking PBS documentary, The M Factor, Shredding the Silence on Menopause, which has galvanized a global movement. Welcome to the show, Tamsen. Tamsen, welcome to the show. I have been such a fan of yours. I think I have watched you for a long period of time. And then as you've sort of stepped into this menopause space, just so impressed with your drive and your advocacy to really make a difference for women's health. I've got to ask,
Thank you.
Why women's health? Why menopause? What made that become the focus of a lot of your work?
Yeah, it's a question I ask myself sometimes because I am here, and it seems like it was a given all along. I lost my mother at a very early age, and so breast cancer, and that was always something that hung over my family and me, and I was always aware of it. But it wasn't until I actually had my own personal experience with menopause and not knowing what I was experiencing that I realized there had been no progress from the time that I lost my mother, who had gone through a medical menopause as a result of double mastectomy and chemotherapy, to where I was today, a few years ago, landing on the bathroom floor of the news studio, not knowing what was going on, heart racing out of control, lots of brain fog, lots of anxiety, and not sleeping. And all these years had gone by without a conversation. I'd never had the conversation. And as a member of the media, I had not had the conversation to even talk to viewers about. So it was kind of this double whammy. And so I started doing research, getting deeper and deeper into understanding where there are so many gaps, and saying, like, I don't know what I can do as one person, but I know what I can do in terms of as being somebody that asks a lot of questions as a journalist. It's been my career my whole life. And it wound up, this is probably my most personal story that I think I'll ever tell to help women in whatever way I can. So
how many years is it, if you don't mind me asking, between when you lost your mom and your menopause experience? How much time elapsed between that?
That I lost my mom in 1990, and I had my incident happen in, I'm so bad with numbers, I'm sorry. I was 48 years old, so it was about 28 years.
28 years. 28 years. So in 28 years, your mom's experience, your experience, very comparable.
Very comparable. I mean, she never talked about it. I just remembered, and this is how I realized that she was going through it. A few years after what happened to me, and I started talking about it on social. Obviously, we had very different ways of being able to communicate what was going on. But I look back and I remembered there was one particular trip to Lake George over the summer where she had gone through her first surgery, and she had gone through radiation chemotherapy. And then I realized that she was sweating, pouring sweat all the time. She would have water and she'd be throwing it on her chest. And it was always like kind of a source of, she'd laugh about it and the family would laugh about it. And I remember thinking about it one day and I started crying. I was like, oh my gosh.
She was suffering.
She was suffering, but she was trying to laugh about it because I don't even know if she knew what was going on. I don't know if she knew she went into an induced menopause at that time. So it makes me really sad to think about, but it also makes me know that that's the reason for this. And so whether she is watching or guided me or it just kind of all happened this way, I feel like there's a reason that I'm here doing this, because it wasn't a plan.
I know. And same for me. Like, I entered this space without a plan or a vision or anything like that. It was really about my own health. And my hormone story started in my 20s. But it's so interesting to me, in the same 25 years or so that I've been seeing patients and practicing, like not much has changed,
Isn't that
when it
incredible?
comes to what their experiences have been. And I think of my own mom, and I had shared this story recently too, that when she was my age, she had a lot of mental health stuff going on, a lot of anger, a lot of rage, high, low, all over the place, which really disrupted our family, and really impacted our experience growing up as young girls and then going off to college and things like that. And in hindsight, she was suffering. She was probably going through menopause and having and experiencing the loss of estrogen and progesterone and all the things that women experience at this phase of their life. So I feel for the women of prior generations with the lack of access and the lack of knowledge. And unfortunately, we still have a lot of work to do today. When you look at the landscape of today around hormone health and menopause, what do you see?
I see incredible doctors like you, not afraid to step up and talk. I see women louder than ever before embracing this conversation. And I actually see us really banding together, which I really like. I've never been, I was a journalist for a very long time, and it was really just kind of me and the story or the people that we were helping. I've never been surrounded by a community. It gets me almost emotional because I've never been surrounded by a community of women like you, of the other women we know within this space that are really working to help each other, like tirelessly, just wanting to help one woman at a time. And it's making a difference. We see it making a difference. We see women coming together, communities coming together, women talking about it, books being written about it, conferences being had about it. And so it's a big deal. And so I see that change, but I also know there's so much lacking in it.
Yeah.
So despite everything we're doing, we still need more.
We do. And, it's so interesting. I've been following you for a while, and I've known about your work for a while, definitely your work in journalism. And I think I remember your announcement on social the day you said you were stepping away from your career in journalism, which I think spanned over 30 years, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah.
What prompted that decision? And maybe paint what those 30 years of journalism were like. What were the highs? What were the lows? And what made you step away?
Yeah, I mean, journalism is my love. I really enjoy storytelling. I really enjoy bridging the audience. And, I had an incredible run and career, and I did all sorts of things. I was able to tell stories within communities. That was really the big part of it, from New York to, before that, Orlando, Florida, West Virginia, Philadelphia. I mean, I'd been all over. When you're a young reporter, you move different markets.
Right.
And so I was able to do that and really be embraced by a lot of amazing communities. I did things like chase hurricanes. I did things like I did. Yes.
I didn't know that.
I
one I didn't
was
know.
one of the ones clinging to the stop sign.
Yeah.
And would go to, would go where stories were. And one of the larger stories that I did go, I was embedded in Afghanistan for a period of time, telling the stories of our soldiers there, and so that was really an incredible, probably a life-changing experience for me, not understanding all of that as well as I did once I left. So that was an incredible moment. And then, I spent the last 15 years or so anchoring the news. And so those would be story of the day. So something would happen like a Hurricane Sandy and the impact that it would have, or 9/11 and the impact it would have, and the stories and the people, and you get close to people, and, you hurt with people and cry with people, and, you have stories where you laugh with people. So I was really grateful for all that
experience.
And stepping away was, it was a long time in coming. Like, it didn't happen overnight, but I knew that this next area, I just felt this pull of, like, I have to tell this story. So every day I'd go into work, and all I could do was thinking about this. I'd be like, what if we do a menopause story today? What if we do a woman in midlife story today? They're like, enough. And so they were really grateful and really just amazing about it all. They let me leave earlier than I was going to, and I still go back from time to time. So it's really a nice
to see them. That's
yeah,
amazing.
They knew it was really important to me. So it was really nice to be able to say great things about your former bosses. I like
Well, I think
that.
there's such a story, speaking of stories, just in that. I think it takes a lot of courage to step away
Thanks.
from something you've done for a long period of time. What was your first step? What sort of motivated you to move away from that? Were you scared at all?
Petrified. I'm still scared when I think about what I did.
When we think about women in menopause too, or just this period of life in general, it is an opportunity to take those leaps and to jump, right? And do that which maybe you never had a chance to do before, but a lot of times people are held back by fear or scared that they're going to fail. How did you have that conviction that this is the way to go?
I think all of it, fear, finances, failure, like every F you can think of, but I made a plan. There's no question. Like I had to do that. It was a few years in advance that I started really thinking about it, and I started talking about it all the time, not leaving necessarily, but talking about what I wanted to talk about next. And I think what really showed me the reason for it, or the reason for this conversation, was social media. I mean, social media did a lot to
huge,
really open that world up to me, open the community up to me, show me what was needed. And so that was a very affirmational in terms of what I did and what people wanted. And then when I started doing the work on the documentary that we released a few months ago, I really knew that that's where I wanted to be. Yeah. So I made the plan of what I wanted to do, what I wanted it to look like. Look, I still every day is a little bit different as an entrepreneur. I'm never 100% sure what's going to happen, but I definitely know what my end goal is. My end goal is to close some of those gaps when it comes to research dollars, to access to information, to making sure that women know what's going on, and to making sure the generation coming up behind us knows what's going on. So I know that's my end goal, is to leave that as what I don't
Your
have
legacy.
daughters of my own.
Yes.
I don't have daughters of my own, so I just kind of feel like all of these are my daughters
I love
that I
that.
want to, to shepherd into this next area and not suffer like that. And if I can do that, that's feel pretty cool about that.
That's amazing.
It feels good that
It's amazing. Let's talk about the documentary.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about it. What it's called. It just released a couple months ago. How that was born. I can't imagine setting out to make a documentary, and I just want to get behind the creative mind a little bit. What did you do first? What did you do second? How did you pull people together?
Thank you. Yeah, it's called The M Factor: Shredding the Silence on Menopause. And my original partner, Joanne Lamarca, and she was a former producer on the Today Show. We got together.
I know Joanne.
Oh, you do?
I know that
she's
name. Yes, for sure.
Yeah, good friend. She's my Menno sister. And so we got together talking because another friend of ours said, listen, all you guys do is talk about menopause. I am so tired of hearing about you talk about it. You guys talk to each other. I'm going to introduce you. She literally introduced us. Joe and I got on the phone. We scheduled it. We actually found our date of our first conversation. It was an hour and a half long. We had it both on our calendar on a Zoom. And we just talked about how is none of this information out there? I mean, this is a time almost 3 years ago now. Why aren't people talking about it? How do we get information? What do we do? Why do we think hormones are doing? What do we do? And so, over the course of a few months, we said, listen, maybe we should just see if there's some kind of appetite for people wanting to learn and share, because we weren't really sure if people were willing to share at that point.
Right.
People weren't running around going, I'm in perimenopause.
Right.
I mean, we've changed a lot in the past
Very
few years.
much, yeah.
So we went out into the middle of Times Square. We were still a little post-pandemic at the time. People were in masks, like, what do you want? And we'd go, could you tell us about when you knew you were in menopause? And
would they actually talk to you?
Some did and some didn't.
Okay.
A lot of women were like, I don't even remember it. Others, I remember one sat down and she goes, menopause made me leave my job because I couldn't think anymore in conferences and meetings. And I went, what? Yeah. So I remember thinking, we were just like, wow, there's a lot to go on. What do we do with this? And we said, maybe we just put something together, like an hour-long special, and put it up on YouTube. Like, we didn't know what to do.
Right.
And then about 6 months later, I met Denise Pines and Kobe Atlas, the other two partners in this now on the West Coast. And the two of them, I was talking to them, and Denise has a business. And she said, what are you working on? I said, a documentary. And she said, so am I. I said, what's it about? She, menopause. I said, so is mine.
Oh, my gosh.
We got together. We said, let's not compete. Let's join
Come
forces
together.
and really do something really special. And we did. We got a lot of no's and a lot of people that, we said, like, would you want to air a documentary? No, there's no audience for it.
What was the pushback on that?
There's no audience for it. Yeah. It's a niche group. It's kind of depressing. People aren't going to want to hear about that. And so we felt, for a little while, it was like a slow going process, but we kept going out and doing the interviews with the doctors. And we said, we want to make sure we hit a lot of doctors, as many as we can. We funded it ourselves because we didn't get a lot of funding until after, the end. And then we wanted to make sure we had women's stories and, a real mixture of women's stories to make sure that we had diversity there in terms of what women were going through, the ages of what they were going through. And so we put it together, and then PBS said we will air it.
Amazing.
And so that was super exciting. And so it started going market to market. And then what we decided to do is to be able to offer it up for the past however many months it's been now for communities to come together. And so that's what we did. We've licensed it out for free for communities, so we could have as many people be able to have the conversations about it. So we've had, I think, over 300 plus screenings to date in over 33 countries.
Oh my
and growing.
goodness.
Yeah. So we have a screening recently in France. We had one in the UK. So they've been all over the place. But the more important part, aside from seeing the film, is the conversation happening afterwards. So
What's the feedback been?
Yeah,
What's
we just get women
after?
coming together saying, we sat there for an hour and a half after the film and talked. And I went, oh, thank goodness.
That's
because
incredible.
that's where we're going to make change. That's where we're going to make change.
Where do you think? So let's take the documentary. Let's chop it up into little blocks. Talk to me about the research consensus.
Yeah.
Where we landed there.
Yeah, well, there's a lot. When we set out to do this, we set out to do a couple of things: answer as many questions as we could, and give the audience as many questions as they could to ask. There's a lot of confusion about hormone therapy.
Yes.
If you ask 10 doctors, you'll have 15 responses, maybe more. And we know that. And so we set out to find doctors that, wanted to share what they were doing with patients. Either they were in the research space or that they were currently doctors that were seeing patients, because not all doctors are seeing patients at this point.
Right.
And some were involved in telehealth too. And then we wanted to talk to workplaces as well. And so, we talked to Dr. Lisa Mosconi about her research into the, brain and menopausal
health,
brain, which is really important. We talked to Kelly Casperson, who's been a very
I've interviewed her.
big voice in terms of sex and in terms of testosterone. We talked to Dr. Sharon Malone, who's just really incredible about taking really tough information and making it understandable. And her mission is to make sure women don't suffer. And that's really, really important. We talked to Dr. Mary Jane Minkin, Dr. Stephanie Fabian, Dr. Mary Claire Haver, Dr. Wen. We wanted to make sure we had a mix of the research and doctors that were really talking on social media. And so I think at the end of the day, the consensus for, the majority of our doctors is really understanding hormone therapy, explaining that, why they're recommending it to patients, what they're saying if patients are not at least being offered the conversation about it, and making sure that everybody knows that their experience is going to be different.
I think
what's
that's
going
the
to be
key.
good for you and good for me is
Personalizing.
going to be different. If my mom were alive today, she wouldn't be a candidate for hormone therapy. So does she get left out of the conversation? And so it was really important for us to make sure that those women are not left out of the conversation, that lifestyle changes are going to be important. Supplementation might be important. Exercise, under lifestyle, sleep, stress, all those different things, how we work out. There's a lot we don't know. There's 1,000%
So much work to do still. And, I can speak from my perspective of seeing patients and working on this over and over again, that really the answer is in personalization. It's not 100%. It's not a one size fits all. It's not HRT for all. It's not none for anyone. I loved meeting and talking to Sharon Malone.
Yeah,
she's got this 35 year perspective on the field, which is so rich and so fascinating. But I love that, all of these voices were highlighted. But that's the research part, maybe even a little bit of the clinical part.
Sure.
I actually have a clinical question because
I hope I can answer it. I don't know.
Well, no, it's more like looking at the landscape, right? Because I know you interviewed some of the best and brightest in the field. Is that conversation happening for the average woman in an exam room across the globe? Because I hear from women all over the world too. Is it happening for everybody across the globe?
100% no. 100% no. And that was really that was one of the other reasons for the film, is that not only that, we need as a society so many answers, but women need answers as to what to say if the doctor is not having a conversation, or if they say, listen, this is just something all women go through,
right?
Or don't give them any kind of conversation about suffering. And listen, I know that, you can't expect your doctor to know everything, but I do feel like
At least a conversation.
At least a conversation, and not to keep putting the onus back on the woman to go in there and have to say, like, here's the research study that I found. But unfortunately, that's where we are right now in a lot of different ways. I'm grateful that there are doctors like you, like the doctors in the film, that are unafraid to speak up and are bold and brave about doing that, and not saying, this is all we know and this is where it's going to stop, because that's not
the answer.
We can't do that. I've been to DC now 3-4 times because we need more money.
Right.
We need more research. We need and we need the media also to take whatever research and what studies. So that's where I kind of feel my role comes into all this, as being a loud voice.
Well, let's talk about DC. I actually wanted to ask you that question. Like, on the political front, on the advocacy front, on the legislative front, some would say we're in a dark era for women's health. What's happening with women in menopause? What's happening with research funding and clinical funding too? Because I feel like you can have research, but you have to do the clinical work too. Because sometimes what's happening in the lab doesn't replicate. It doesn't. You're dealing with a human being who has a personality and all this other stuff going on with them. So,
all those things that really matter. DC, we went about maybe a few weeks ago. We went and we met with one of the senators there, because they're back to introducing a bipartisan bill, which I think is really exciting. And that's what we want to see. I mean, that's to go after money. That's to go after even public service announcements to make sure that women are aware of what's going on. That's to go after research dollars. So that's an exciting thing for me. There were like maybe 3 different bills aside from that have been discussed. But I think, if we're going to we go back to the drawing board in a lot of different ways of figuring out, what we do. But this conversation's nowhere near not happening. And I think when we see, what I always say is, like, menopause is not a partisan issue.
No,
it's just not. And so that is what my line is, and that is what we're fighting to have happen, is to make sure that we get that.
And this is trying to get money for research,
for both, for research, for announcements, for public announcements, for awareness. I think we need all of that. I don't know where we stop. Like, I don't know where we stop with that. We need education. We need medical schools to be educated. There's so many different areas. You could play whack-a-mole with what you want to pay attention to. But I think money is an important conversation, and education is the second important conversation.
And women having accessibility to the information, I think, too, right? Because we've got women, I am so fortunate to meet women, like, literally I'll do telehealth visits and somebody's sitting in a cornfield and, saying, we don't have access.
Isn't that amazing,
I know,
to be able to reach those women? I think it's just amazing.
It's incredible. But they're like, we don't have anybody around here to talk to.
Nobody close, nobody within miles. It's unbelievable.
It is.
It's unbelievable. And that's so important. And that access is important, affordability and all those different things.
What we're seeing here in America, is that true internationally as well? What do you feel like in the global scale? How is menopause treated? Now, again, remember, I'm coming in with this very old perspective of holistic health, Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, merging it with conventional Western medicine.
But a great perspective.
A great perspective. But in those litanies of medicine, menopause was actually revered. You were sort of rising into your own. You were becoming the matriarch of the family. You were relied upon. Your wisdom was important and valuable. And it wasn't sort of this retreating and like hiding in a corner
irrelevant
type situation, being invisible. That's the word many women use. It really wasn't that. The rest of the family and the rest of the culture gave you a lot of importance and relevance, But I'm curious, as the world has westernized, right? And as, women have entered into, the working world and things like that, and family looks different. Is this an issue internationally? And I'm curious as to whether you, with your screenings, have noticed this.
Well, I feel like, first of all, gosh, I wish we lived in a world where it was like that, where the woman was revered and didn't feel. When I hear words like invisible or irrelevant, it makes me really sad, because I think about all the things that woman has to share. And I grew up in a family where we had, a lot of the intergenerational all the time.
So did we.
So it was very. That was more commonplace. Like it was very clear. But I know how things have changed. Yeah. What I have found interesting, and I haven't been able to visit all the different countries. I've got some of those coming up, but I have watched how these documentary screenings have been embraced. And I think that there's the same kind of thirst. I think that no matter where we're talking about, we had one in Lithuania not too long ago, New Zealand, Singapore. So when I look at how they're embraced, I think that thirst for the conversation of women of this age, of this Gen X, older millennials are feeling the same way. Like, they feel that irrelevance. They feel that no one's talking to them. They feel like they're suffering. I was at a screening the other night, and all the rooms around my age are between 45 and 55 years old, and one hand after another. Like, my doctor told me to smoke pot to get my sex life back.
Yeah.
My doctor told me, but I was like, what? Like, some of the it made me really sad to see how these women are treated. So I do think there are some cultures that revere women of this age, but I think very few, it seems to me, that I've heard from.
Well, I think even in the more traditional ones, I think we've moved away from it because,
and that makes me sad because those are the ones that I was holding on to hope.
Yeah, so work to be done across the board,
holding on to hope.
For sure. Well, as we think about women in menopause, what are their options today? Where do we lead them? What's the starting point? Is it the first point just to have the conversation?
I think the first part is, for me, and I kind of always poo-pooed this a little bit, but when I would hear people go, oh, community is really important, I hear myself saying it constantly because I really realize how important that community part is right now. I had no idea when I was younger how important it would be to this day. Yes, the conversation. Two, to make sure if you can't have the conversation with somebody else, like you and I sitting here, isn't happening all over the country, right?
Right.
And so if you don't have that comfortability, I'm gonna leave here and be like, that was such a great conversation. I'm gonna ride high all day, and I feel even more empowered, right? But if somebody else is not able to do that, or they're in a cornfield, or they're not able to be somewhere to have it, or they don't feel comfortable, what do they do?
Right.
So they have to hear from all of us to say, like, okay, you're part of us now. Come on, it's okay.
Join us.
Have that conversation. And if you don't get a response back from a doctor, telehealth, I feel like they're very
such
clear
a game
on what
changer.
they have to do.
Yeah.
Such a game changer. But if you're not getting that response, you have to be brave enough to move on. And we have to give women that access to be able to do that. We can't say, oh, go find 5 doctors. Hope you can also at the same time, get out of work 5 days a week to go run around from doctor to doctor. So that's where I think telehealth is a big game changer.
Make a difference,
but we want more access for these women too.
You mentioned menopause in the workplace a couple of times. What's happening to women in the workplace? I know I hear the stories from my patients,
I'm sure you do.
And it's really something. Women that could lead companies, meetings, conferences, all of a sudden are just like, I can't remember what I was supposed to say. It's super embarrassing, But what's happening to women in the workplace in terms of not just we know symptom-wise what's happening to them, but how much is work culture and company culture adapting to the rise in this conversation?
Yeah, we did a big section of the documentary about it because we did find a company that was implementing policy, and that was exciting. And look, every workplace is different. One person's going to work in a classroom, another is going to work behind the wheel of a car, the other person is going to be in a C-suite. So we know that we can't say, okay, here's the policy for everybody.
Right.
But I think what we can do in most, if not all workplaces, is allow there to be room for that conversation. Allow there to be some kind of safe place for women to have at least. I don't care if they get a downloadable. I don't care what it is, but at least have a resource to be able to go to be able to have the conversation, and then figure out where we go from here. Whether we're talking about flexible, work days or hours, whether we're talking about some type of help in the workplace. What we don't want to do is single women out and say like, oh, you can't do your job.
Right?
You have the menopause.
Right.
No. We're not gonna. You're not gonna be promoted, or you're gonna be punished somehow because you can't do your job. But I'm with you that I see over and over again. And I was the same way. I was reading a teleprompter. I'd look at the words in front of me and I'd be like, I
can't see that.
I can't remember it. I'd break out into the sweat and then skip it, because there's nothing else to do when you're live, and you know nothing else to do when you're in the middle of a conference and can't get the word out or talking in a conversation. And I think that really hurts our self-confidence. I think that it's detrimental to women, which is why we want the help first so they don't even get to that stage. But for right now, trying to help implement some of those policies, tailored, again, customized, personalized to different workspaces, I think is important.
I think that's just, I get really sad when I see women retreating from their lives, because in some ways, this is actually where we're the strongest, right? We're finally have usually very good self-esteem intact. We are clear about what we want, but then to struggle with all this noise and then to take a step back, I think that's such a disservice to the community and, leave alone, to the woman herself. I think that one of the things that I personally would love to see is just more resources for women, when they're going through menopause, and less sort of, shame and guilt around accessing those resources. I think a lot of times people hear the word menopause and it's immediate negative connotations. I'm getting old. But if we can somehow, here's my hope, if we can somehow take that word and either rebrand it or be like, you're about to enter the most exciting phase of your life, and here's why. I think that's something that the workplace would benefit from and that communities and societies would benefit from too.
I'll work on that with you.
Okay, there we go. That's our mission. We're done. But I do want to talk about your book because you've spent, not only do you have you've done so much, first of all, for the space, which everyone should thank you for. But,
thank you.
But you also have a book. And that's coming out soon. So tell us a little bit about that.
I had too many words left after the documentary.
I love that.
I was like, I have more.
More to say.
There's so many incredible people in this space, and there's so many incredible resources out there. And so, aside from doctors, I wanted to make sure that everything is part of this conversation in terms of lifestyle, in terms of exercise, in terms of workplace, mindset, dating. There's all of these things we can't leave out. So many doctors have written incredible books like yourself, that really hone in on the science and the research. So I wanted to pay tribute to that and make sure that that was in there in a really actionable way, but then go beyond the doctor's office and say, okay, there's also the lifestyle of all of this. What we do in the kitchen, what we do in the bedroom, what we do in the boardroom, what we do beyond that. And so I was like, well, I don't even know what to call this book, which I struggled with it for a long time. I'm like, what do I call? Hot, hotter, hottest? Like I had all these, I had 300 ridiculous names. I was like, coming in hot, when life gives you hot flashes. I'm like, I didn't know what to do. And then I went, oh, this is how to menopause. Like this is kind of what
I like that.
Thank you.
I like that.
It was a lot of sleepless nights and made my husband crazy, but it really was that, it was like, what do you do at this time? And how do you make it a great way to, take charge of your health and reclaim this part of your life versus this narrative that we have been told, which is to shirk back and feel invisible and be grateful to still be there on the stage, no. And so that was why. And, I was excited to be able to spend time doing it. And I don't know, I love bridging that gap between experts and audience. And I think, that's where the journalist in me still keeps coming. I keep coming back to it.
Those are your roots.
Those are your roots. Dragging me back to it.
So in the book, tell us a little bit, is it like a how-to guide, like key takeaways, type of thing?
Key takeaways for sure. Women's stories for sure. Okay. I really leaned on the community quite a bit with it to make sure that I got all stories in, because I don't know every experience. And if in one day you probably have 50 stories you could walk away with from patients. And so I reached out to the community on social, on my email list, in our Facebook groups. And I said, every time I write something, I'm like, sex. What's going on? What are your questions in sex? What are some of the stories, that you wanted to share? What would you tell your partner if you could write them a letter? So I wanted to make sure there was actionables and that it was easy to digest, because that's huge for me. I have zero attention span. And I wanted to make sure that depending on where you were in this journey, you could flip to that. I don't know if you remember that book, Simple Abundance.
Oh yeah.
Do you remember that book?
I love that book.
I do too. Yeah. And I always would have it on my bedside and I'd be like, I need this page today, whatever. I don't know what, I think it was by dates, but I always needed to flip to something and it was useful. And I wanted this book to do that. So I broke it up into parts. So I made the stories actionable. I have some personal stories woven in there of my whys and resources in the back so people can access those, and quizzes and QR codes for more downloadables that I couldn't fit, and recipes and stuff. So
it's interesting because I've been definitely watching the hormone and the menopause stuff, and there are a lot of books that have come out, and a lot of different people weighing into the field, but I don't think I've seen one yet from a journalist perspective.
Thank you.
I mean, I could be wrong, but from a storyteller's perspective, because I think we as clinicians are going to tell the story from our vantage point, right? What we see, what we've experienced, you're hearing our voice.
Right.
But my guess is that you're putting a lot of voices together.
Yes, a lot of voices.
And I think that there's, a certain gift to that for sure.
Thank you.
How are you, because are you okay saying how old you are?
Oh yeah, I just turned 54.
54. Okay.
Yeah, I was like, wait, how old am I?
I do that all the time. I'm like, but talk to us about how you're taking care of yourself in this phase of life.
Yeah.
And what's worked for you?
Well, I have a couple of things. I have seen some changes over the past few years. I'll be honest. Like I do hormone therapy, you know that. And so that was really helpful
It's a game
for me.
changer
It was
for
really a
many,
game changer, especially with my sleep. I have, since I left my job, it was a year ago, I really tried to focus. I was like, okay, you have this year now. You have no more excuses. You know, why you can't go to bed at the same time and get up at the same time, except if you
Are you bad
caused
about that?
I was terrible about it.
Too.
I know.
I
and
get
I'm
in
not,
trouble.
I'm not, I know. My ring yells at me. I have the Aura ring. It screams at me
My
all the
husband
time.
goes around shutting all the lights off.
Oh,
He's
he
like,
does? That's
bedtime.
good. That's so good. My husband doesn't because he just falls asleep on the couch. He's just like falls asleep, and I go, oh my gosh, I'm still working.
I know.
And I'm
I
like,
know.
if he's not in bed yet,
I
it's
can
okay.
relate. Yeah.
So those are my two biggies. And then I walk every morning. Like I try to do, I don't know, 10,000 steps in the morning, and I do my phone calls during that. And so I do a lot of calls and walking, getting out first part of the day. And then I'm trying to change how I'm taking care of myself. Like I was the sloppy sleeper because I'm like,
who needs sleep?
I'm still really cool. I can do it for 3 hours.
Yep.
Fine.
Yep.
I was kind of I'll eat whenever I'm hungry and it's fine. But I've really tried to implement the protein thing in my day, and that is work.
That's a
it's
big
like
one.
a chore.
Yeah.
It's not a easy thing. Cutting back on alcohol, huge. I was always like, I don't really care very much about alcohol, and I never really have, but I enjoy my glass of wine or champagne, and it really has changed. My body has changed how it deals with it.
Oh, yeah.
I had a glass and a half of champagne the other night. We went out. I hadn't had it for a while. I was sweating in the middle of the night. It was like I woke up 3 times. And I went, what? Cool.
It's not worth it.
This is 54,
Yeah.
but I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
So now I know. And then how I'm managing stress, I think, has been a big thing. Yeah, I used to think that was just something you just deal with and you'll figure
Power
out
up.
along the way.
Yeah.
But I've really focused on that. And being present with people a little bit more as I'm getting older. My dad's getting older, and my nephew's getting,
What
my
did you
husband.
find your biggest physical challenge was in menopause, and your biggest emotional challenge was in menopause?
Oh, that's a good question. My biggest physical challenge, I think, was the brain fog, 100%, because it really hurt my self-confidence at work. Like it really, I felt uncomfortable doing a job I'd done forever, like nervous. I'd get on the set and I'm like, just get through this newscast.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
A lot. And a part of my job was ad-libbing. So you just talk like this about a story. And I didn't trust myself to like what I wouldn't be able to retain or remember. And I used to be the person that could talk for an hour about this, table and not have a script, and then I'm like, script.
Yeah.
And then emotionally, I think, I guess, I look at what my mom went through, and I guess I just feel sad that we're still here, but encouraged that we know we're here now and we're doing something about it.
Yeah.
And I just think about that big gap of time and the suffering that went on.
Yeah.
And a lot of the women now that I hear from that go, I was never even offered that, or I suffered for this long, and is it too late for me to do this? And what can I do now? So that, I think, bothers me a lot.
Still.
It keeps me up. Yeah, because I hear those stories all the time. So it's like, but I feel like we're moving in the right direction.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about the book and where everyone can find it.
Yes, of course, howtomenopause.com. That wasn't taken. Nobody.
There we go. I love that. Nobody took that one.
Nobody took howtomenopause.com. It's got perimenopause and menopause in it, obviously, both of those, especially with so many symptoms of perimenopause being so prevalent. And I'm always at Tamsen Fadal, so you can find me.
Amazing social platform, by the way. I love you on social. You just open yourself up to all of us. You're so
maybe
great
too
on
much.
social. No,
maybe too much sometimes.
It's incredible. It's so inspirational. I think it's great. All right, I have to leave you with one last question.
Yes, give it to me.
What makes you whole?
Oh, what makes me whole? Yeah, my family makes me whole, 100%.
So, we've had some other guests. Family's a big one.
It is. I think as I've gotten older too, that would be my answer. But I lost my mom young. I still have my dad. He's 85 next month.
Healthy.
And I feel, yes.
Wow.
Like I took him to Spain this year. What? He hadn't been overseas in 50 years.
Yeah.
It was the coolest thing. So, it's my family. And my husband is just like, he allows me to, he's my big cheerleader, and that's pretty cool. Yeah.
That's a
He
gift.
doesn't try to fight me from being who I am.
That's such a gift.
He might want to, but he doesn't.
Yeah, mine tried and failed. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, mine just keeps it inside.
I know. So sorry, sweetie. But anyhow, well, it's been such a joy
I
and such
love
a
this.
pleasure.
Thank you.
I have loved watching you, learning about your
Well, back at
career,
you.
and then love to see all your energy sort of channeled in this space, which women really need. So
Thank you. Thanks for what you do.
And thank you for
women
being
every day.
here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening and watching
watching today's episode of Whole Plus. Be sure to share this episode with your friends and family. And if you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast on YouTube or click the follow button on Apple, Spotify, or wherever it is that you get your podcasts. And don't forget to follow me on all social channels at Dr. Taz MD. Until next time, stay healthy and stay whole.